We delivered today by Jeff Salingo is focused on what we need to learn in higher education to better prepare our students for employability. The conversation today will be facilitated by President Howard Horton of the New England College of Business and Finance, also known as NECB. Over the past decade, Howard has led a transformation at NECB, resulting in thoughtful growth. He is passionate about providing affordable, high-quality, and industry-relevant education to working adults. A few highlights during his tenure: tripling enrollment to almost 2,000 students. Virtually all of his students are employed full-time, and most have at least 50% of their tuition paid for by their employer, and in some cases 100%. Working with over 300 corporate partners, NECB provides the most affordable degree programs among the private institutions, proprietary institutions in New England. They deliver industry-relevant programs 100% online to accommodate the busy schedule of working adults, with students enrolled from over 37 states. All of NECB's programs are ranked among the top 10 in New England by U.S. News and World Report. NECB offers the flagship Master in Business Ethics and Compliance degree, whose graduates are working on fraud prevention, good corporate governance, and corporate social responsibility. So thank you, Howard, for your work, and let me turn it over to you now to introduce our keynote speaker. Just before you do that, Howard, just a couple of housekeeping matters. Following Jeff's address, there will be a book signing with his new book, which I know Howard has right there and is going to reference. In addition, lunch will also be served in the foyer. So thank you very much, Howard and Jeff.
Thanks so much, Sandy. We have a fantastic opportunity this afternoon, or this morning, to speak with our keynote speaker, Jeff Salingo. Jeff is going to have a conversation with me, and then we're also going to open it up to the audience, so it's not exactly going to be a keynote address. But some of you have already read Jeff's writings. He was formerly a top editor at the Chronicle of Higher Education. He has a weekly column currently in the Washington Post. He is in higher education. He is a professor of practice at Arizona State University, which is today the largest university population of undergraduate students in the United States. He's also a visiting scholar at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And most importantly, he's been a great author over the last few years. He's written MOOC University, he's written College Unbound, and we're here today to discuss There Is Life After College. I think that title gives us some relief, because I'm not sure if there wasn't, we'd all be here. But it's interesting because in this last book, and even the other two books that Jeff written, it's oriented towards the consumer. So I wanted to just ask you, a lot of higher education writing is written for the industry. The only consumer books that I've read are about how to get into college. This book talks about how to make the most of college. I haven't seen much written about that, so I'm wondering how you wound up taking that on as a project.
Well, largely, there's not much. It's great to be here, by the way. Thanks for joining me in this conversation, Howard. When I first started selling books a couple of years ago to publishers in New York, one of my first editors I met said, you have to appeal to people's anxieties when writing books. Because he said, go into any bookstore and look at the most popular books in any bookstores, right? It's about getting a job, it's about how to deal with pregnancy, how to deal with children, and of course, admissions, right? So the largest section in any bookstore under education is all around admissions. And what interested me after I wrote College Unbound, and I was traveling the U.S. talking about it, is that afterwards I would have all these parents and students and counselors come up to me, and students and recent college graduates come up to me and said, okay, well, this is all fine and good about how higher education is changing and about how to get into college, but now we can't find a job after college, or my son or daughter is living in my basement, to use the overused term, or another overused term is, they're working at Starbucks as a barista. Why are so many graduates today struggling to launch after college? And And so I started to dig deeper into some of the statistics on this, and it made me really realize that in some ways it didn't matter where you went to college, which is kind of a popular frame now, don't anywhere. It actually matters a lot, and in some cases it doesn't even matter if you get a degree. Now, it does in some cases, in many cases, but what really matters are the experiences you have in those undergraduate years, whether it's 2 years or 4 years, that are much more important to launching after college.
So you mentioned that the phenomena of maybe 20-somethings living in the basement that's recently crept into our presidential campaign. A few years back, the movie Failure to Launch was considered a comedy, but I guess the notion that students graduate from high school, go right on to college, get a job, and move out of their childhood home, we know that that's changing, and maybe not for the best, but is it an economic circumstance or a cultural circumstance that you would attribute that to?
It's some of both. The economy is obviously much different, for example, than when I graduated college 20 plus years ago. It's much more difficult for students coming out of college who have really no idea what they want to do with their lives and have no idea, and I'm really interested in the panel this morning, how what they did in college tracks to a job market that is changing. Entire occupations are expanding and contracting at an alarming pace. Even things that used to be kind of stalwarts of the economy, things like law and medicine and accounting, are no longer those jobs to be had after college. And in fact, we know from one recent survey or one recent study from Oxford University that 50% of jobs today are under threat from automation or artificial intelligence. And so what I heard over and over again from students is that, I picked this major because I was told I had to pick a major, and then 4 years later I started applying for jobs, and it's like a foreign language to me because I never knew all these job titles existed. Because most students still pick what's familiar to them, right? They pick what their parents did, or what their friends' parents did, and the age of economic segregation. What worries me is that, particularly for many first-generation students, they never see their jobs that exist, and so they get to college and they have really no idea what to pick. So some of it is the economy, and some of it is this phenomenon which we know from psychology and other fields, that it's just taking students longer to mature and become adults. And to be honest with you, there's nothing wrong with that. We kind of have this system of higher education and the transition to the workforce that was created, in some cases, centuries ago, and kind of the current system really after World War II. And this idea was that you graduate from high school, you go to a four-year college, usually that's what we mean by college, and then you go right into the workforce. The fact of the matter is that a third of kids born today might live to see their 100th birthday. Right? We know people are working longer, they're living longer, and they're taking a lot longer to launch into adulthood. And I'm starting to wonder whether we need to reconceive of college and the pathway to college, or I like to call it post-high school education, and think of it as more of a longer period of time. That we don't force everybody through this one pathway that at 18 you go to college, 2 or 4 years later you graduate and you go right into the workforce, because it's kind of not working for most students.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think in your book you refer to students that are not immediately getting the job as wanderers or stragglers, but you also talk about, you mentioned a third are going to live to 100, but you also mentioned a third are what you call sprinters. And sprinters have certain characteristics. They tend to be very focused on their major. They tend to graduate with a little bit of debt, and they tend to get the jobs that they want. So let's just look at that segment for a minute, because there are probably some people that would like their kids to be sprinters. What does a sprinter do to be successful?
I think a lot of people want their kids to be sprinters. But the fact of the matter is, so I just want to give a little bit of background to the audience who didn't read the book, and I hope you all do. Is that the first chapter outlines a survey we did, a nationally representative survey of about 800 people in their mid-20s. And what we wanted to find out is if we reverse engineered their career from that point back to the point when they were in high school, what did they do to get to their mid-20s? And where are they right now? And we classified them into one of three buckets. They're either sprinters, they're wanderers, and wanderers kind of take half of their 20s to get going, or they're stragglers, meaning that they take most of their 20s, and probably everybody in their audience and those people like this who have many false starts throughout their 20s, and then something about that magic of that 30th birthday gets them going. at some point. And what we found was that only a third of students are that first category, the sprinters. Those are people who don't necessarily move fast, but they move with a lot of, they're very deliberate about what they do after college. And they either go right on to graduate school or professional school, or they move right into a career. And what we found out about that group is that largely 3 things are very key to their success after college. Key to their success, and by the way, what impacts the success of the students in the other 2 groups. Those three things are internships or experiential learning. Much more important than I think most of us have come to realize in the last 10 years. So 80% of sprinters, for example, have at least 1 internship in college, compared to only 20% of the graduates. And why is that important? Because, as I found in the book, most big employers and medium-sized employers, 80 to 90% of their new hiring now comes from their intern pools. Which means that at some of these companies, if you don't intern there, you're never going to get a job there. So internships, number 1. Number 2, debt and level of debt. Most of the sprinters, almost half of them, about half of them had less than $10,000 worth of student debt after graduation. Average now is over $30,000 for most 4-year students. And why is that important? Because the more debt you have after graduation, the less flexibility you have around the job market. We saw this in law school graduates in recent years. The more debt they had, the amount of debt really focused them on what job they would need to take. And so they would forego some good jobs, or they would forego moving to a more dynamic city or a more dynamic economy. And the third piece, the credential itself. So almost all the stragglers never achieved a credential. They had some credit, but no degree. And what was really worrisome to me is that, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, the people in their 20s are the largest group of Americans today with some college credit and no degree. And that is really worrisome to how students launch after college.
So you mentioned debt because it was shocking. A few weeks ago, Consumer Reports came out with a piece that said, is college ruining my life? I don't think any of us would like to hear that, but 45% of students that had college debt said it wasn't worth it. Is the bachelor's degree, which I think you still see as kind of a centerpiece, kind of a foundation, but not the be-all and end-all for getting the right job or getting the good job. But what is, you mentioned the debt level of sprinters, so what is your view about the perception of that college is not going to get me where I need to go?
Well, again, and I think it goes back to how we define college. Unfortunately, I think largely people like us in the media are to blame for this. We define college as a 4-year residential experience, and as almost all of you know in this room, that is not the norm for most people today. So I think that one thing that we need to do is break down this idea that college is that 4-year experience. What we do need to focus on, though, is that credential is absolutely critical, not at any cost. But it's absolutely critical because if you look at most job ads, nobody ever says, some college credit required. They want a degree. Now, that being said, the employers I've spent time with over the last couple of years, and I talk to employers, by the way, of all kinds, all sizes, nonprofits, for-profits, the big fancy fun employers now, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, but also places like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which hires more college graduates than any other country in America. And what I heard over and over again is that the degree is still the strongest signal of job readiness, largely because it's a sign of discipline, that somebody starts something, that they finish something they start. But it has a lot more noise around it. And what they're looking for is, how do we have other signals that someone's job ready, particularly around, and we talked about this morning a little bit, the soft skills. They no longer believe, many employers no longer believe, the degree is embedded with the soft skills. And that's why they don't trust it anymore, which is why they're hiring more people from their intern pools, because it's essentially a 3-month job. And what they're most looking for is not, can somebody do the math and science in those internships, or can write, sometimes writing those internships, but do they have the soft skills, is what they're really testing.
And you discussed the person that's kind of there used to be the I shape, which meant that you have a very hard skill, very employable, very direct competencies in one area. but that we're really looking for that T-shaped individual with a horizontal bar representing some of those softer skills. And we've been hearing that all morning, that this is what employers...
Which is why I think the liberal arts are absolutely critical
Yeah.
to the future of this country and to the future of the workforce. And this idea, but at the same time, this idea that college is either for a broad education or for specific skills, it really needs to be about both. It really needs to be about both because you really do need to develop that broad stroke of the T and the deep piece of the T. And what worries me is that we're so focused, and this is not really at the college level, but I see this. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old at home, and I see this in K-12 school, is we encourage kids to be well-rounded. Not a bad thing, but in this day and age, they don't necessarily spend enough time on any one thing as a result, right? A lot of admissions officers tell me they see applications come in with a lot of sign-up clauses, right? Things that where kids like sign up for something, but they never have a deep commitment to that. Perhaps in athletics, that's probably the only thing where some students show a deep commitment and they kind of focus on one sport at an early age, which probably has some of its own problems. But for the most part, they're not focused on one thing for enough time. And that is really valued now in the workforce. Somebody that has both the breadth, but also has depth.
So let's talk about some of the things that students can do to build on that bachelor's degree. Because you talk about the gap year before college, you talk about a gap year after college, you talk about short-term programs after baccalaureate credentialing. So if a student wants to build their own strategic plan, their own business plan to get the job that they want, how do you build around that bachelor's degree to establish that?
So one thing that I really encourage students in the book, and it's unfortunate that we don't do this because we're so focused on getting students in and out, and now we're even focused on getting them out faster, right? Let's just get them out as quickly as possible. And I know it's all because of cost. And one thing I haven't quite figured out is how to pay for all this. So I will preface that with this. But I'm a big fan of some students taking a gap year before college. And the gap year, I think, gets a bad rap. I wish that we would come up with a better name for it. A lot of it comes from the gap year in the UK, which was largely reserved for people from upper middle class families, and that was true in the US, where students would go off and back through Europe. But as I profile in the book now, there are a number of programs in the US that are at all different kinds of price levels, including this program I profile in Baltimore, which is essentially a gap year for all, which is really focused on getting students 3 things that many of them need before they go to college, and what they're not ready for. One is an advisor, somebody who's going to help them, a mentor who's going to help them figure out their career plans, academic support, especially courses where they're not ready to go to college and have. And second is an internship or some sort of work experience. The fact of the matter is that we're at the lowest level of youth employment in the U.S. in a very, very long time. Only about 20% of teenagers now work while they go to school. When I graduated high school, it was 40%. Right? Just think of all the things that you learned on your first job. I worked in a hospital cafeteria, one of the worst jobs in my life. But boy, did I learn how to get along with people of different backgrounds, of different ages. I learned how to show up on time. I learned that value of work. And many students, particularly, again, middle and upper income students, don't necessarily work before they go to college or even in college. And the internship, as a result, becomes more important. So that gap year is important because I think it helps students decide what they want to do, or more important, decide what they don't want to do while in college, and it sends them off much more mature. And then I talk about the time after college and the increasing number of these bridge programs, whether they are the boot camps that we talked about this morning, the General Assemblies of the world, and others that teach you real-world skills, or others like I profile in the book, like KORU, which I know operates in Boston and a couple of other places that give students those real-life skills in those weeks after college. And I increasingly see this as part of a new learning economy that we're going to have for the rest of our lives, right? Learning is not going to end at 22 or 28. And students are going to have to learn how to navigate their own learning. And this is increasingly going to become more important in a gig economy, where they're not going to have an employer telling them what they have to learn and when they have to learn it, nor are they going to have that employer paying for that. And so they're going to have to figure out in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s, how do I get the skills to keep ahead? Not only in my new career, but in my new, or to get a new career. And they're not necessarily going to be going back to get a graduate degree or certificate or go back to a traditional college or university. I think they're going to increasingly take advantage of these shorter spurts of education that we're starting to see grow up online, whether those are the MOOCs or whether they're places like General Assembly or the other groups. And so again, I really want us to think about extending this time period between 18 and 22 for students to get that human capital to succeed in the job.
So you mentioned that it's not so much where you go to college, but what you do while you're at the college. And I probably would challenge that a little bit in terms of that if a college is very highly branded, well-known, you go to an employer, that brand itself is probably signaling something to the employer about the capacity around some of the soft skills. But there are traditional ways of getting your liberal arts degree and then getting a more vocationally oriented master's. And there's also what was talked about this morning, where you start off with a stackable certificate, get employment, and then add on to that as you build towards your bachelor's. And I think that probably is somewhat relevant to the demographic that people are coming from and their academic background. But I'd like you to comment on those kinds of routes, you know, taking the bachelor's and getting the vocational master's to get that hard skill set, and then the stackable, getting the hard skill set first and then adding on the...
Well, and I think one of the things you bring up, Howard, is that there are going to be these multiple pathways. And, you know, many students are getting that kind of traditional master's or that practical master's to add on to their liberal arts degree. But I also think I profile an effort in the book at Georgetown University, which is designing this combined 4-year bachelor's master's degree. So it's not an add-on, it's not a 4+1 or a 3+1. It's an integrated experience that provides students with a liberal arts bachelor's degree and a professional master's degree, all in the course of 4 years that they're trying to design. And it's an integrated experience. So as you move through your 4 years, you're taking more master's work and doing fewer bachelor's works. But what this all said, you know, and there's a project-based bachelor's degree that Arizona State now is testing. What inspires me right now about higher education, there's a bunch of these experiments going on at a number of colleges and universities around the country. So that's why in some ways, in my mind, this is not necessarily being led by, you know, the 50 or 100 or 200 most selected colleges and universities. I think some of the most interesting innovations happening right now in higher education are happening at those institutions that, for the most part, in some cases, are struggling to survive. Because you know, it's a very crowded marketplace right now. The traditional group of students, particularly here in New England, are dropping, and they're projected to drop for a long time. And so they have to try new and different things. And I'm actually very confident, as a result, about the future of higher education, because I see a number of efforts on this front.
Thank you. We're going to continue talking, but I would like to take some questions or comments from the audience. So if you have any, please just queue up to the microphone. What about disruption in higher education? You've written about that. You've written about MOOCs and Unbound. How is that impacting the preparation of students for the workplace?
Well, so there's not as much disruption as I think most people thought 5 years ago when MOOCs came onto the scene. One of the things that I think MOOCs have done, if anything, is they've kind of repositioned our idea around learning in this post-baccalaureate world, right? So most of the students that I met when I wrote my second book around MOOCs were students who weren't looking to get a credential. So for example, you know, we always said MOOCs were a failure because only 10% of students completed the credential. Well, most students weren't looking. That was not their intent, right? Their intent was to get a short spurt of learning to get ahead in whatever they were doing, right? So they wanted to see a particular lecture. They wanted to see, they wanted to get particular reads. And again, this is how most learning now is going to happen in the workforce, right? Think about how we all do our own learning in our own lives, right? I just moved and you know, we bought this house that was kind of old, and I had to figure out how to fix the plumbing, because finding plumbers, by the way, is very difficult these days. And so you know, I would jump on YouTube and I'd watch a 5-minute video, and then I would be a master plumber. And learn how to fix these things. Of course, that's all in jest, but you would learn in these short spurts. And I even give this example in the book around Xerox, which used to have this huge campus outside of DC in Leesburg, where they would bring their people once a year for professional training. They sold that off several years ago, and now they do most of their professional development online. And they don't do it in, you don't focus 1 week a year on it. You're doing it every day in short spurts, and they can track that. And so that, to me, is what the MOOCs and the boot camps and all this other types of new ways of learning is what's going to happen to us in a professional world after the baccalaureate degree. But I think what's most important is the bachelor's degree is not going away. The associate's degree is not going away. That's still going to be the foundation of post-high school learning. I will say, though, I do think the master's and professional certificates are going to change in a big way in the next 10 or 20 years. Because I don't think everyone needs that full plate of learning that comes with those degrees, unless they're going to go on, for example, to become an academic. In many cases, those are expected.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Xerox because the learning and development budget in corporate America is about $400 or $500 billion. So there's a lot of internal training that happens at companies. But at my college, even though employees are getting that kind of training, if they don't have an associate or bachelor's, the employers still want them to come back. So in their case, there's college after life, not life after college.
Yeah, and there's still that, again, and this is why that, we live in a society where education after high school is absolutely and so most employers want some sort of credential after high school. And so even if they're doing their own professional training, they're still requiring their employees to go back and get those.
Sir.
Good morning, Howard. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for this conversation. I'm John from Bridgewater State University. And what you say about the sprinters and the wanderers and the stragglers resonates with what I'm hearing from employers who talk to my office all the time. I'm representing Career Services. And one of the things that they say to me is when employers go to many colleges and universities across the country, they're seeing 600, 700, 800 students at one given event. So how do they remember those students that are employable? And one of the things you mentioned about the sprinters, those are the students who are engaged in classroom projects. Those are the students that have rehearsed their elevator speech. They're doing internships, they're studying abroad, and they're getting it. They're living the high impact practices. But when an employer goes and collects resumes from every single student, they're labeling the students with a check plus, a check, and a check minus. So the check plus are those students that are doing what they should be doing and what we're promoting to our students. Do an internship, study abroad, polish up those language skills. But with the students that are getting the check is the middle of the road. They meet the minimum qualifications. They have the right major maybe. But what the employer is saying is they're asking the student, why didn't you do an internship? I'm looking at your document, and they're saying, oh, I didn't have time or no one pushed me. And then the employer that actually labels some of our students with a check minus, those are the stragglers that you talk about. What is being done for those students? And I think that the employers are saying to me and to many people in higher education, why aren't you requiring a course to be taught on employability and soft skills from freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year? Every year there should be a course.
This needs to happen, and it needs to happen not only in the freshman year of college, but it actually needs to happen sooner than that. I think what's happening is, and there is a socioeconomic factor here, is I think first-generation students and students coming from a low socioeconomic status actually have a lot more greater resilience, in my opinion, the students I've met. They just don't know how to navigate the institution because they don't have parents or others telling them how to navigate the institution. And they don't have the professional networks that most of the wealthier students have, or the second or third generation students have, to get into the job market. Now those students, unfortunately, don't have the grit and the resilience because somebody did all the work for them all the way up to this point. So we have two very different groups with different issues. But part of the problem is that too many students come to college waiting for college to happen to them, right? They sit on the sidelines. I mean, we know this from the NESE surveys, right? 50% of students never have 50% of seniors never have an in-depth conversation about their career plans with a faculty member, right? I saw this so many times in reporting the book, and I have this extended anecdote in the book about students at Oregon State University who never went to office hours, for example. 4 years of college, never visited a professor during office hours. And why not? Because nobody ever told them they should, right? Or people told them, only go if you have a problem, right? We wait too long to tell students how to navigate college. When should that happen? Personally, I'm not sure why they didn't know that in high school. And maybe it's because of our test-centered culture in high school, is that students don't even know how to navigate their own learning in high school, right? And so then they get to college and they don't know how to navigate. So I think that we need to start before college, because once they get there, the clock is running, right? And if they waste 2 years just sitting on the sidelines and not getting those in-depth learning experiences, they're going to be behind. And then they're going to get to their senior year, they're going to start applying for jobs. And what is going to happen is what I heard from so many students I interviewed, nobody ever told them. Nobody ever told them.
So would you recommend for people that are in higher education building up that co-curricular, extracurricular, internship, experiential components in their institutions?
Yes, but don't. I was very fascinated by one of the last questions in the previous panel, because we also have a translation problem in higher ed. So it's not good enough to just say go out and do an internship, right, or go out and do a co-op. Students have a very hard time transferring their learning from one place to another. So from what they learned in the classroom to the job, and what they learned in the job to the classroom. Because for the most part, up until the time they're in high school, somebody did that for them, or up until the time they're in college, somebody else did that for them, right? So many of the new graduates I met had an impossible time telling an employer what they learned in a particular course on a particular internship and what that could do for them in the job market, right? They just told employers what they did, right? They said, employers, I had this internship, I had this major, I took these courses. Well, that's on your resume, right? You don't need to go to an interview to tell employers that. They couldn't transfer that learning. And so what I think is critical is not only do colleges need to set up internships and co-ops, but they need to help students with how we learn as humans, how they learn as humans, how they reflect on their learning, and how they explain their learning. I have a whole chapter in the book about telling their story. How they tell their story, their learning story from the moment they were born or whatever through college, how they tell that to employers, because that's what gets them hired. And a resume full of internships and coursework and degrees don't get them hired. It's the stories they tell about their learning journey that gets them hired.
Sure. Hello, thank you for the great remarks. My name is Teppo Joe Tennis. I work at ERA, where we target those middle skills that we've been talking about. And I'm leading efforts for online career readiness, so thinking about these very same skills and thinking of how to work with community colleges. And one of my struggles there is that when I think of career readiness at ERA, we do have a career readiness course, but really career readiness gets taught as part of IT, as part of business operations or financial operations. And so I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about that. Have you seen that kind of models elsewhere in community colleges or other places where it's not just the career courses that starts at freshman year or in high school, but who successfully integrate this kind of learning everywhere?
No, we haven't, because I think career development is still seen as something we don't do. Like colleges and universities, our job is not to prepare students for jobs, right? It's to provide them with a broad education to get them ready for the workforce, but our job is not to get them to jobs. Now, that's not true of all colleges and universities, but it's true of too many, and I don't think they integrate it into the curriculum as a result, and I think they need to start earlier. I will say also, by the way, I don't want to let employers off the hook here, because I think employers do give mixed signals, a lot of mixed signals to prospective students. And I tell this story in the book about about P&G, Procter & Gamble, and the CEO, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, A.G. Lafley, who was a graduate of Hamilton College in upstate New York, big fan of the liberal arts. And he told me at a conference he loves liberal arts college graduates. And I was telling this story to, a couple of years later to a recruiter for P&G who said, laughed that off. Because she said, when was the last time that the CEO of Procter & Gamble hired a brand new college graduate? Right? Yeah. They're interested in the long term, which was, again, I'm interested in that person who asked the question earlier. I'm interested, as a recruiter of new college graduates, I'm interested in the short term. I need somebody to fill a job tomorrow, and I know they're going to be gone in 2 years. So I want to make sure that they have very specific skills. So again, one company, 2 people, telling students 2 very different stories.
One of the things I found interesting in the book was, and I was actually surprised by this, is that you recommended geographic location, that geography was very important to jobs, and I'm thinking, you're a proponent of online learning. My college is 100% online, but you're saying for graduates it might be important to locate in San Francisco if they want tech, in Philadelphia if they want pharmaceuticals. Can you comment on how you see geography, location playing into trajectory for careers?
Yeah, this is not a bad thing for rural colleges like Upstate New York. But I think what's important is that experiential learning now of all kinds is so important that for students to get that during the academic year, it's critical that they're in a place where they can get it. And particularly in fields that they're interested in, right? So if they want to be in film, you want to be in New York or LA. You want to be in music, you want to be in LA and New York or Nashville. In politics, DC, right? So you want to be near those power places of employment. And because you have access throughout the year for experiential learning opportunities, unlike students who go to college elsewhere, who really only have that during the summer. And so what it's incumbent on those students who do go elsewhere, or schools that are located in far out places, is how do we develop this in the curriculum all the time, right? And sometimes it might be online, sometimes it might be in gap years during college in order to give students those experiences. But just segregating them onto a campus for 4 years is really not going to do them well in a job market that now rewards that experiential learning throughout college.
So if you were going to put it in a nutshell, what do employers want?
Well, employers want, I think, the soft skills that comes from, and I'm not being paid by the liberal arts colleges, but by the classic liberal arts colleges, right? Or the classic liberal arts curriculum. And it's things like communication, teamwork, problem solving. Even when Burning Glass, which many of you know is based here in Boston, did this analysis of 20 million online job ads. And they wanted to find out what are the skills that kind of get you in the door. 4 out of 5 of them, 25 skills appeared in 4 out of 5. 20 million online job ads, 25 skills appeared in 4 out of 5 of them. So the top 5 were remarkably similar, no matter the occupation and no matter the job. And 4 of those 5 were soft skills, right? Communication and writing, customer service, problem solving. There was only one hard skill in those top 5, and that was Microsoft Excel. So even if you're an English major, learn Excel. And so I think, to me, it's the more you can practice these soft skills, the better off you're going to be in a job market that is full of ambiguity, that we have no idea what's going to happen to it in the next 10 or 15 years.
Thanks so much. I think technology is a piece of every approach now to every career. You need that.
Well, you definitely need that. I talk about digital awareness in the book. Most, if you go to any college campus, most kids are doing this. Sorry, I'm trying to find my phone, right? They're like this. Oh, anybody on the street is like this too, right? We talk about digital natives. We talk about the generation of digital natives. But if you ask most students, they have no idea about the technology that's behind these devices, right? And every job today is a tech job. My career was in journalism. The hottest jobs now are in data journalism. People who know how to manipulate vast amounts of data to tell stories. No matter what occupation you're in, tech plays an important role. If students don't really understand technology, they're not going to do well.
So we're going to have to wrap up. I just want to give you the opportunity to give us any concluding words or concluding advice for higher education in New England.
I think what's really important is that we really rethink what is required in the job market of the 21st century after high school. And we really think of redesigning higher education from the moment of 18 to the moment of somebody in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Because the fact of the matter is that college is no longer this box you enter one time in your life and exit 4 years later. It really now is a platform for lifelong learning. How do we build that into a system that has been around for centuries and really looks at college as something you do one time?
Jeff, thanks so much for your insights today. I think that the fact that you're bringing this information out to the consumer and not just keeping it in the confines of the Ivy halls of academia is great. This is the book. I'm not a paid commission salesperson for it, but I can say I'm assigning it to my senior team at New England College of Business. It's a very good read. It's great research, but beyond that, it's applied research, which we as academics always like to see happen, applying to how we can better our institutions and provide a better experience for our students once they graduate. So thanks so much for being with us. There's a book signing, I believe, outside, right outside.
No, I'll have a chance to talk to any of you.